Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and tonight's guest is Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Doc Ram turned Navy SEALs into super soldiers, and he has instructions for you. Imagine that the dollar already collapsed, but your life goes on, almost as if nothing happened. In fact, you're the one who's acting as a source of support and inspiration to those around you. Is that actually even possible? Author and researcher Dr. Richard Allen Miller reveals a depth of knowledge and experience in alternative agriculture, physics, and metaphysics. Miller began working in the secret world of Navy Intel, SEAL Corp, and then MRU in the late 60s, and now has amazing experiences and conclusions to share. Dr. Richard Allen Miller even met Timothy Leary back in the day. His writings reveal a depth of knowledge and experience. Before many leading-edge concepts became trending topics, Miller was and is in the international front lines of research, experimentation, and documentation. Today, Miller writes for Nexus Magazine and is a preferred guest on many internet radio programs, as well as Leak Project. In the 21st century, Miller is re-emerging at a critical time in humanity's evolution where metaphysics and practical survival converge.
I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you. I know that we've talked before in the past, and you've just got so much knowledge over the past 40, 50 years of research that you've had the opportunity to do. And I was hoping tonight we could really touch on the main topics of time travel, metaphysics, and how to use it in everyday life, and just some of your personal experiences.
Time travel. Well, it turns out that gravity and time and space are not what we really think they are. And the example that I like to use is a drop of water that falls and hits a pool. This drop of water will leave waves going out of it, predicated on how big the drop is, how far it falls, that kind of thing. But when it hits the water, the waves going out are considered a secondary wave and basically have to do with the future and various timelines. And they change having to do with the size of the drop, how far it falls, how big the water pool is, a bunch of things like that. Now, the wave that goes inward and slaps itself creates exclusion zone water. And so the bubble that bops back up after it hits the water, how when the drop hits, it seems to have another drop that goes back up.
Right. That
drop is not solid water. It's actually a cavitation ball that has trapped the medium that it's falling in a topological surface called a torus twistor space, like Roger Penrose would suggest. And they're doing studies on that now as basically time travel and cold fusion, because that's where the energy comes from, is that cavitation ball of creating a black hole to a white hole, a double ganger. And so that inner wave, that wave that slaps in, that becomes a cavitation ball, is the past, and it's the primary wave. And the way you get to make that real is by doing the moment where there's a beginning, a middle part, and an end. And as long as you can stay in the moment, the longer you can, your timeline is starting to relate to your past. And that's where everything happens like it's supposed to and why you're here. Now, it doesn't work that way, and what happens ultimately is that you either, choose to see the glass as half empty, i.e., kicking and screaming at the end of the day. And so intent is what actually happens at the end of the day. When it's all done, did this happen or did it not happen? And that is, you're close to purpose, but not purpose. Now we have another problem. The concept of intent, you have choice, in terms of flowing or basically trying to fight your way out of the thing, creating karma and a lot of hassle and energy. And when you do it that way, what's happened is that intent is still, you ended up doing what you wanted to do, but not exactly the way you wanted to do it. Now, you have choice. That's what made you God's favorite that way. And what we have a problem now with Jade 2.0 software. It can accurately profile everybody and knowing what you're going to do before you do. And so it's like Minority Report, this idea that you've got some kind of machine that knows what you're going to do before you do. Now, with a slight grade of advancement in evolution, consciousness, now intent is different and can be distinguished differently than purpose, why you're actually here. Crowley used to, in his magic system, say, if you're doing your true will, none will say nay. It's like the universe wants that to happen. And the future is like talking to your present and literally changing the cavitation bowl of the past. The metaphor is almost usable in almost everything. Our galaxy, our solar system, binary. We're a binary system. Your inner, angel or, your higher self is female. For you, as a male. Usually it's an androgyny thing and is a relationship between your future and your past. And that's kind of a metaphor. It isn't like that, but that's the way I choose to, relate to things because it makes it simpler for me to understand how to integrate it into my current life.
Is it possible to change the outcome of your future?
Yeah, you change the timelines by the moment. And actually, there's a whole bunch of different possibilities of how it's going to end. And you have the choice, predicated on the moment and how you choose to accept that moment.
The larger something is, it seems like time kind of changes a little bit. Or when you get to a certain speed, like the speed of light, time changes. So I'm just trying to grasp the overall concept of time.
Sacred and profane is the way most people put it in psychology. It's the sacred time where it's timeless. It's the moment. It isn't like 2 hours. It's just, you don't even think about it. Just where did the time go? You're not into time. You're into something else.
There's a lot of possibilities that have actually been released recently on certain websites and information out there that shows possibility of time travelers. Like there's this Charles Chaplin film from the early 1900s in black and white where somebody's walking around in the background and you can see it looks like they're on a phone or some type of communications device. It's very strange. Have you seen that video?
I saw that Charlie Chaplin thing. Wasn't that weird? Yes. Well, I saw that movie. It's interesting. I don't know what to make of it. That's the kind of thing the military had me doing for years, running that stuff down to vet it out and finding out whether it's something we want to study or it's just, something.
So when you were with the military, they had you doing X-Files kind of stuff?
Well, it wasn't as, it wasn't like Hollywood. Wished it were. It was mostly boring. We did a lot of things. Remember when Patrick Flanagan was doing his Pyramid Power? That would be one of the things I did. We did that kind of thing. I can send you basic ideas of things we did like bioluminescence and Project Paraphile. We had the first artificial computer, intelligent computer, working Russian literature, to try to figure out where they were going with it. they would have all these different publications from Czechoslovakia, other things like that, and then the research would stop. Why is that? And that would always be because something was important. They made a discovery, and they were going to stop publishing. By the way, it was Czechoslovakia that was really doing incredible work. It was not Russia. Russia was basically at that time kind of superstitious, sort of. You know,
Okay.
I mean, like Kalugin and trying to move things with her hands across the table, and she had a magnet on her knee. Get a grip. Well, that's how that worked. You know, mostly things were not real. Uri Geller was real, but because I caught him cheating, it just threw out all the baby with the bathwater, which was really a shame. Andrea Puharich was one of my teachers, and a lot of this stuff that we were checking out was hokey pokey. However, I remember Keith Milton Reinhardt and the Aquarian Foundation, and I remember Jack Schwartz of Aletheia. Jack Schwartz could stick a needle through his arm and stop the bleeding with his mind. And if you don't think the military want to know how that works, that was why we set up the Menninger Foundation.
So that's where you basically looked for abilities that people would have that could help the Department of Defense and military-industrial complex.
We did studies everywhere, you know, China Lake, Argonne, Livermore, Boeing Scientific Research Laboratory, Battelle. I mean, we had projects going on everywhere. So, you know, Stanford Research Institute, that kind of thing. You know, the 70s were different than the 80s. The 70s was about blue sky. We had no idea what we were going to discover, and it didn't matter. It was, you know, for the advancement of man. In the 80s, it all changed, and there was no longer any interest in research that didn't have application. It was like we already had enough knowledge for man or something. I don't know how that worked.
Just became even more compartmentalized, and the corporatocracy took over even more. That's, yeah. Now, another thing, too, that I'm thinking about is I've talked to whistleblowers in the past, like Douglas Dietrich, that claims there was so much dark magic as far as what the occult realms go in certain applications when they went to war in Iraq and black ops, proxy wars type stuff. Did you notice a lot of that in the military, or was it more just any type of mind over matter abilities, not necessarily pushing lighter or darker applications?
So for the last 250 years, for sure, all major bureaucracies, Republican Party, all of them, have an occult element in it for the high-end scholars, reserved for ultra-elite. And so when I came out of graduate school, it was like going to college. I was rushed by all these different lodges. I can't remember some of them, but like Skull and Bones or Bohemian Grove, they were out to recruit. And the thing was, I had to armor up just like I did Christianity to protect myself.
Now, when they made contact with you, I always thought that the Skull and Bones, you actually had to be bloodline specifically to get into that. Is that not true?
You know, divine right. There are secret chiefs. There are people that are repositories that are unusually different. Myself, I'm really blessed. I don't know that I'm special, but I seem to have a lot of memory.
And I've also noticed that the astrology is used with the super rich. These very high-end, elite, aristocratic families have used astrology for thousands of years. And then you look at certain people in positions of power, you know, and you look at some of the leaders of past, like Stalin and Hitler and their birth dates and such. Do you think that there's a connection there when you say people are certain, I guess you could say, vessels for these spirits or sparks of energy to manifest within because of the astrology behind it?
Well, so astrology was always used like mathematics for the physics, and magic is an advanced form of physics with a mystery school. Usually that's a correct way to look at magic. You don't really know how it works, but you can use that system, like a woman driving an automobile. She doesn't think about how a internal engine combustion works. She just knows that if she puts the key in, certain things will happen, and she has expectations. Now, the Czechs had cosmobiology, and let me tell you, it was not astrology like into astronomy. It was more like biorhythms into something else. They had, Janef wrote a book called The Lunar Sex Cycle of the Female, where they could tell when the woman is born, a clock is set when she will menstruate. And if she moves, that clock changes with, different places on Earth. And you can accurately predict what the sex of the child will be, if you know when conception is, and you can use it for birth control. Now, the project I did was having to do with earthquake hazards with the planet Neptune. When Neptune and Earth and the Sun are in a specific geometric alignment, there is there's 3 sigma. That means 99.9975% probability of an event with a major earthquake on Earth, not having anything to do with the Sun. Now, how does that work? Like the storm on Jupiter and how it affects, attitude or something. I don't know. But cosmobiology, we're working with rhythms of synchronicity with events and how they would relate to the Earth, like astrology. And basically, astrology is arbitrary, in Aries, Taurus, or so on. But really, most astrology was used to define lost items, to do other things besides, your personality and things like that. I think astrology is best seen as tendencies. If you have a bunch of 12th house planets, there is a good chance you're going to be hard-headed and go to jail. Well, that's how it works. I mean, I don't know if it's true. I have found that to be very true, just like, certain conjunctions in certain houses, and you have events that will occur.
Now, and that makes me wonder, when you look at time, space, events that occur, sometimes people say fate is, in essence, a reality. Some people think that you just create your own fate, and there is no fate, basically. So, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe we're supposed to do certain things, and we can kind of stray away a little bit, but as long as certain events take place. And you brought up at the beginning Aleister Crowley and how he wrote a lot about do what thou wilt, and what he meant by that was do what your will is, in essence, that you can follow a path. And he talks about how everybody's like a star, and if a star is on path, everything will be fine, but if it gets off path somehow, then it can, hit another star or planet or whatever. Certain issues take place when it's not in alignment. So it's very interesting that you brought that up. And when you also mentioned the artificial intelligence technology that you guys had access to 40-something years ago, and you look at the machines out there today that are running...
Oh, yeah, it's different, yeah. It's quite different.
Well, and the reason I'm bringing this up is some of the stuff now today they've got supercomputers that are running quadrillions of floating points per second, and even if you took 7 billion people on the planet and you broke that down to this one specific computer could calculate thousands of scenarios per person per second. So essentially, if all of the information obtained from your cell phone and the people you talk to on Facebook and social media and everything else they have on you, all this information database, it'd be pretty easy for this artificial intelligence to access it, surveillance, etc. And then I've heard of these technologies that were around, I think, even back in the 50s or 60s from the Tavistock Institute, where they could basically overlay biorhythms and brain waves to somebody that doesn't even know it. They have like this certain type sound gun or something where it could make them really angry, agitated. It could make them sick. It could make them do things that, like Manchurian Candidate kind of stuff. So do you think that they might actually be using that stuff now, kind of behind the scenes?
Of course they are. Jade 2.0 software right now is being used in New York City to accurately predict when a crime is going to happen in a given region 28 minutes before it actually happens.
Jeez.
That's what the Jade Helm experiments were all about, was to shake down the software, see how accurate it was.
Oh, so that really was for software. I always thought that was just somebody made that up.
No, and not only that, On's algebra, all these different forms of algorithms now that are available, mostly Clifford and other forms, are used as logic systems like NOR-NAND logic. I remember when it went from AND, OR, and NOT to NOR-NAND, where it was an abbreviation, where you called it object-oriented, and you could take 15 files that might be, 20 megs, and compress it down into 3 megs or less, and 2 files. Object-oriented, having to do with different similarities and similar differences. There you are, John Bohm.
Now, the time travel stuff that we were talking about a moment ago, I also think of John Teeter. You've heard of him, right?
No, maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay, John Teeter, he started this huge following about how he supposedly came back in time, and he used some type of IBM computer that's not even that advanced, and he wrote about a lot of stuff that was happening in his lifetime that's in the future from now. And some of the stuff was just a few years ago also. And there's a lot of things that did take place, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners here on the Leak Project have heard of John Teeter, and you'll probably send me some emails in regards to this, and I hope you do, because he made a lot of predictions that were pretty spot on, and then a few that you could kind of say, well, that's vague, I'm not really sure. And then you've heard the theory of additional timelines and stuff like that, and different dimensions,
right.
The omniverse, so a lot of possibilities. But have you found some technical data and stuff that you can use for, maybe the possibility of making a time machine?
Well, a time machine is Ezekiel's vision. It's a throne chariot of God. It is a face-center cubic hexagonal closed-pack structure that you envision in your mind's eye, the diamond body. When you envision in your mind's eye specific geometry, sacred geometries, it sets up resonance and things happen. And I'm going to say that the structure in water is so remarkable, it's like 6 zeros more efficient than our gallium arsenide and some of the current things that we use for solid-state physics in the so-called forbidden zone. The exclusion zone is so more accurate that you can probably include all timelines just in the structure in your body. That's 6 zeros, 1 million times more efficient.
So could you get into a little bit more detail with that for the layman out there or somebody that's really new to that subject? Because that sounds fascinating.
Well, you mean exclusion zone water? Jerry Pollack. Jerry Pollack has written a book called The Fourth Phase of Water. Jerry is professor emeritus at the University of Washington School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesiology, and was my lead in 1970. When Boeing laid me off with 30,000 other scientists, Jerry hired me, and I went to work in anesthesiology. I didn't work for Jerry. I was under him, but Jerry has done some incredible work in what exclusion zone water is. What exclusion zone water is hydrogen peroxide with a third hydrogen molecule that's brought up, and forms a bond. It's called water, even though it's not really a water. It's called exclusion zone water. And that is what you find in the leading edge of a wave. That's why it moves a little faster. It's different. And it is, what happens is when water touches anything, it has memory and it knows what it's touching. All things it touches are different. And because water is so efficient, if it's tellurium, that water surface tension will run right up the wall and over the edge. If it's plastic, it won't hardly do anything. It'll just sit there and, be flat water, if you will. And so all the different things that happen when that is what led to Rustum Roy's work at Penn State on homeopathy, where you put a single drop of something in water, and it changes the entire system of water. Now, because of the layering of going around it, we use baking soda when we were SEALs to change the pH and bring it back into true, because having really good pH in your water is very important in terms of digestion and what happens in your stomach. And so having the right kinds of water is as essential as all those bacteria.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I think about. You look at the different forms of water that are coming out there now. You've got reverse osmosis. There's different filtration systems. Now there's the new alkaline water where it's supposed to have, I think, 7.2, somewhere around there, the alkaline.
Well. Okay, look, that water is para and ortho water. That means levorotary. That's the molecule is going in this direction or that direction, para and ortho water. Then there are two stable isotopes, deuterium and tritium. Then there is clustering water, like, Willard water, which is H709 with a free radical ion. That was a bunch of different people wrote about that, Schomburger et al. Now, that's what you find around the waterfall. That is extremely healthy water. So there's all these different options of water. Then you start getting into exclusion zone water, and then the layering of the way it sets up the structure. And so just pH is just one part of the whole soup of what water is and what it is not.
The alkaline water itself, though, I mean, you've seen those machines, right, or heard about it?
Yeah. The alkaline water is essential because actually your best water for digestion is 8.4. That's very slightly acidic, alkaline. And you can do that, water coming out of the ground is 7.0. If it's in plastic and been hit by sunlight, there's a good chance it'll be 6.8 or slightly acidic, just slightly. That will go directly, like Coca-Cola, straight to the urine. It won't even bother using it for digestion or anything like that. So, what you want to do is be mindful. Temperature is very important. You want to, when you're in a restaurant, I would strongly recommend that you not have any ice, that you have room temperature water with possibly an electrolyte in it, like a lemon, that will allow the electrolytes in your body to fire differently. It'll make the water activate better.
We're how much percentage-wise the human body water?
70% of your body is water. It is in 99% of the body. It's in everything. Even though it's only 70%, that means you're less than 10% human. And the rest of you are bacteria, viruses, molds, and water transport processes.
Gee, that sounds exciting.
Well, if you eat a lunch of sugar, you'll notice that you need to use Rolaids because you have candida, and it'll smell. That's a mold growing in your armpits, around your crotch, whatever. That has to do with diet. That's why microbes are so critical.
Now, you've heard of Dr. Emoto?
Yes.
And the water experiments that were done, basically, I'm looking at some pictures right now. There's one image where he basically has a piece of tape strapped to this cup of water, and it says, "Love and thanks." And you look at it under a microscope, it's this it looks like a snowflake. It's beautiful. And then there's this other one.
Well, that's a little what is used to determine the accuracy of what is in the water, whether it's para, ortho, whatever, deuterium, because it's all there, usually is Riemann spectrophotometry. Now, Emoto is a little zen for me in terms, though he's not the rigorous science that I would enjoy trying to understand. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. What My explanation isn't real. What's real is imagination. So just to keep everything balanced, but my approach is to take a more scientific approach of understanding how to test it, measure it, da-da-da-da-da. Now, I am, in fact, writing how psyche enters matter, how your thought becomes the physical plane. And this is part of my continuing work with the holographic concept of reality, the idea of working with information rather than space-time. Quantum mechanics and quantum universes are all based around time and space. And with that system, you also have indeterminacy. That means the more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. And you have entanglement and decoherence, whereas in a holographic system, all information is at a point, and then it cascades outward or inward as a hologram. And a hologram is then information and resolution of information. And a hologram is defined as n dimensions of information in n-1 dimensions. It is the way information feeds, onto itself. There is a theorem in information theory that says that if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to also answer it. The way you structure your question determines your answer, just like prediction with J2.0 and this time travel software thing, looking into the future, 28 minutes. The algorithms.
Yeah, the algorithms are incredible, and I'm glad you brought this subject up too, because I was thinking earlier about how consciousness is information. So if you're very knowledgeable and understanding, and not just book smarts, but you understand nature and life essence, then I think that would improve upon your consciousness, which therefore would improve your overall essence and spirit and spark. So maybe that's a part of this reasoning here, why we are on Earth at this time and going through these trials and tribulations, to maybe give ourselves a better understanding of the concept outside of the spectrum. Because it kind of seems like most people aren't evolving. There's those select few, like you are in a league above.
Well, don't embarrass me now. I'm not that great.
Well, I mean, you know things that most people don't. You've studied and researched, you know about physics, metaphysics, you've brought it all together. You've actually done the research yourself. You're not just a keyboard warrior. You've actually lived through this stuff. So you're talking of personal experiences. I mean, you were a Navy SEAL, and just in order to get to that status, your mind has to work a different way. You have to be faster and sharper, more astute, because if you're in a situation where you have to think about life and death of, maybe you're taking care of 50 people or somebody else, you've got to think a lot faster than your enemy and not have any moment of doubt. So, I mean, seriously, you've done a very good job too with the books that you have. Those that are listening right now, check out richardallenmiller.com, the website. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of books on there, information, talks a little bit about different topics and such. So another thing that I'd like to discuss with the current state of affairs is when you look at this AI type tech and the people that are using it, do you think that it'll get so advanced that it might actually overcome the creators?
No, God is that which is not knowable by definition. That'd be like, let me give you an example. Like the orca. Orca has a cerebral cortex that's twice the size of man, and that mammal is firing 60% of it. Now, that means that mammal is experiencing reality that man is not even well enough designed to do. And while it's a God, it's not our God, but that is what God is. And so I think there are probably pantheons or hierarchies of God. Bob Dylan said it best when he said everybody's got to serve somebody. If you go into the old Kabbalah and study out of Merkaba mysticism and the Tree of Life, they talk about Ein and Ein Sof and Ein Sof Ur, the veils of Isis. That would be the hierarchy of gods. In the old Bibles, they made a distinction between Yahweh and Yad-Heh-Vah-Heh. And while many are trying to say it's the same God, I wonder.
Let's talk about that for a second, because if you look at the Old Testament and the New Testament and the way it's all slapped together, I myself am not a religious person. I was raised that way, and I appreciate everybody's belief in religion. I mean, you can certainly believe in what you want to, and I appreciate that. If that brings you closer to divine providence or whatever you need to be brought to, fantastic. But it seems you read the Old Testament, it talks about this really angry, pissed off God. I mean, he talks about going and slaughtering men, women, and children.
Yes.
And then Jesus is like, oh, any not sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. He was looking out for people. But then there are those kind of hidden messages where he would say, well, you think I'm coming here for peace? I'm really not. I came here to bring war and bring father against son, mother against daughter, brother against brothers.
I think that there are probably as many religions as there are human beings. I think that everybody is slightly different. The reason you go to church is for fellowship. And spirituality is not what you do, but how you do it. And so, there's a lot of inconsistencies. If you really study the Bible, you'll realize that there's a whole bunch of books that got left out of the Bible with the King James Version. Why is that? Political. And like Enoch, giving you the names of all the fallen demons. Now, the angel, I have to say, if you have the name of the demon, you have control of the demon. That's what exorcism is about, trying to determine what the name of the demon is. Once you have it, Beelzebub, Ezra. Now, if you go back and look at the greater and lesser keys of Solomon, these are the fallen angels, the Lemegeddon that fell. There's 72 of them. The names are like Beelzebub and Ashtaroth. If you go back to the original names of those demons, they were qualities of men that were not deemed worthy, like jealousy, rage, anger, hate, that kind of thing. These were demons. A demon is actually a lesser part of you. In psychology, they would relate to it as the shadow. It is a two-dimensional being where you're a three-dimensional being. It is a reflection of you from something else. And that is, what a demon is, as I understand demons. The devil, I don't know what, the devil never existed before Christianity. It is all the old books, the Nejang, all of them, all the Bordeaux, whatever. They talk about demons, but they don't talk about a devil, which is an entity that is, somehow equal to God and at war with him. I don't think so. I don't think God's at war with anything. And so I have to wonder what that's about. Dietrich is someone I've met and like. I liked him as a person. He's a little goosey. And, in terms of Temple of Set and the Church of Satan and the U.S. Army with Aquino and LeBeau, those things are reflections of a reaction. They're forms of Christianity, just for the record. They're not...
Can I jump in just real quick, if I may? Wasn't the Church of Set, or not the Church of Set, because that's not real old, but wasn't the foundation of Set an ancient deity that predates Christianity? We're talking,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in previous epochs. The Culverin Bible and other scholarly texts that Mark, Luke, others used during that period. There is a really important book called the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, that relates sounds to words, because words and movement, like dance, ghost dance, and whatever, change space-time. And we don't have that technology, but we do know of its existence because you can watch Gabriel Roth, or going back to Kate Bush, or even to Kenneth Anger, and how they use dance as a form, like whirling dervish, a form of changing space-time. Like sound chanting in a certain intonation, like the Word of God. And if you did it just right, things happened. Gabriel. And I don't know how that works. I have been very interested in that area and have been studying that as part of my eclectic backgrounds in these various areas.
That reminds me of Franz Barden. I've read all of his books.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he was certainly ahead of his time, and I like how he gives people practical applications.
Well, okay, Franz Barden was OTO, and before Crowley. And what his change of thing was about was that he was using talismanic magic, which was previous century forms of magic. That's what made him old school as opposed to Crowley, which was new school with OTO. And that's why Theodore Roos and the others just gave it to him, as that. Now, Barden's work is as good as anything that I've seen in terms of taking Samuel MacGregor Mather's works of the Greater Keys of Solomon and the Galusha and actually adding punctuation to it. The demons, each name has a sigil based on magic squares where you use numerology and drawing out a geometry that is your name on that magic square. And actually, you will find that 68 of the 72 demons' names relate to Babylonian star maps. There it is. That was a course I did at Georgetown for a bunch of Jesuits. I didn't get them all, but I got 68 of the 72.
That's a really cool connection.
It shows a metaphor in terms of what a demon does and what geometry was and how it was used in talismanic magic. That was 19th century systems. You can go back to, I don't know, there's a bunch of books. I've done so much that I can't even hardly remember anymore. Things that you would do where you're trying to contact your angel and you can't talk, so you use geometry as a way to communicate.
That reminds me of the book Merlin the Mage or something like that, or
Abramelin the Mage, Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. Yes, that is correct.
Is that
It's part of that.
a good form to actually get to your guardian angel? If you, I know it takes like 3 months
one
or
way.
6 months.
It's an older way. The whole thing has to do with set and setting, as Crowley and then Leary would suggest. Leary's book, The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience, in my opinion, is possibly one of the best books ever written on magic, truthfully. And so, I have a different way of looking at what all of this is about. And I am, you're one of the few people that I've met that even has an inkling of, some of the books in magic and some ideas of what it would mean to come in contact with your holy guardian angel. By the way, that knowledge and conversation thing that they talk about is actually self-realization, where I'm literally talking to my future right now.
So you're talking to yourself in the future. That's your higher self. And it's, some people call it your guardian angel. And if that is your higher self, of course it's going to have your best interests at heart. And Crowley talked about how his higher self was named Iwas, and then he said...
No. Iwas was a deity that he channeled in Cairo and was not his higher self. It was actually, if you want the real deal on it, it was most likely a gray, and or that there's a lot of occult.
We're talking about Lamb right now when he made contact with LAM.
Yeah. I saw those things. I don't think so. Coincidences and metaphor and modern myths, but really, Iwas was part of the Yazidis, and that was a rare book on magic that was written by Joseph Isaiah. He was a Jesuit for the Vatican. In 1921, called the Sacred Tradition of the Yazidi, or devil worship. And the reason we were interested in it as parapsychology was, it was about a pre-Christian devil-worshipping cult. And really what they talked about was the Stargate. That's where the Stargate came out, was in that book. And Crowley and those people were talking about it like you 20 years earlier than when the church came out and published it. And really, the reason we invaded Iraq was for that artifact. Trust me when I tell you. And the first Bush didn't get it, and the second Bush went in with tomography, and after the war, he got on board that ship with all his medals and everything, and he said, we got it, the war's over. And then, of course, the war went on for another 3 or 4 years, but it was a Stargate. Now, a portal where demons were running in and out of it. And it was in the catacombs about 60 miles down in the northern part of Iraq. And Yazidi, which is a very weird religious cult up there in northern Iraq, based on these old artifacts that are in catacombs. Now, the deal is, and here's where it gets interesting, there's a second Stargate. John, it's like in the movies. I can't believe it. It's all so lovely. I can't believe it, Hollywood.
That gives them plausible deniability.
Well, I think it's somewhere in the Indian Ocean. And, of course, CERN is an attempt to create a singulate, which would be like a portal.
You know, let's talk about CERN for a minute, because there's so many different things people are saying it's being used for. There's the official reason to smash, and collide different particles to find new particles. My grandiose envision of this thing is it's being used to weaponize black holes and make these, you want to go to war? We'll just send your entire city to another dimension. We'll open up this wormhole and boom, there you go.
Well, fission and fusion are double-edged swords. The first application was weapons, but they do other things too. And so there's good, bad, and ugly. And it's really not about what it is. It's about its application and or interpretation by man.
Another thing that's coming to mind also, when you look at the old definition of demon, it actually used to be pronounced daemon, and the Greeks looked at the daemon as your guardian angel. Well,
okay. What I'm in touch with is something quite remarkable. It is me in the future trying, like that movie, using tachyons to communicate in the past, trying to tell you to...
Interstellar.
Stop. Yeah. There was this movie about a church, and it had a artifact in the basement that was letting something in from somewhere else. And really, what a singulate is a mini black hole. And, like we broke the atom, and now we're doing fusion, where we put things together. So, of course, we're going to do as well, trying to create black holes. Now, the bad news is the first thing that will be used for it will be like a controlled neutron fullerene fusion bomb. Now, I can send you that paper if you'd like to upload that onto your website.
Yes, please.
As a little gift. That is the more darker side of what they're doing with all of this technology now. They can take a buckyball, a C60 molecule, carbon bonds to itself, and you can have flat sheets of it going on for infinity that are one angstrom thick. Now, a buckyball is that when you have 60, not 61, they form a ball. And a second one is at 120. That means you can have 120 carbon atoms and it'll form a ball. The spatial difference between one carbon and the other is 1.4 nanometers, and it's just enough size to take a single exclusion zone water molecule, H3O2, and put it inside. Now, instead of Fullerene water, let me tell you what that does. When you have exclusions on water, what they're doing in Ukraine and now repeating in Soviet Union, or Russia, excuse me, what they're doing is giving lethal doses of radiation to rats and then feeding them fullerene water with a 95% recovery, lethal doses. And instead, what they're doing is they're putting in deuterium inside it. And then they would activate it using that Lockheed teleportation laser that came out this last year. And what you've got now is a controlled fusion bomb who's able to hold the containment of the explosion at 1.4 nanometers. That level of accuracy. And that weapon is being deployed almost everywhere now. Tactical nuke, if you put fullerenes in an aircraft as carbon fiber to reinforce it, you can activate it with this laser, and there's no forensics. The plane is gone. You can take Building 7, and you can watch that 617-foot beam begin to fall at free fall and steel, and it starts to evaporate right there in front of you. And there's only one thing in the universe that will vaporize steel, and that's a plasma. And so, there it is. They were practicing, and the trigger, I've got pictures of Arnold Schwarzenegger looking at the trigger at the National Ignition Facility in Livermore. There it is.
Jeez. Yeah, the tech nowadays is just fascinating. What would be considered beyond science fiction just 50 years ago, they probably had that stuff 50 years ago. And then I get into the nanotechnology that they're using now. I've read some reports about these literally nano robots that can rewrite fibers and stuff and create things out of the molecules that are already there. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm guessing that we're going to eventually have as many periodic charts as there are different elements, because each element, like water, gold, whatever, behaves differently in different formats, like water. And, you talk about hydrogen and oxygen, and what you've got is a whole bunch of possibilities of the way the universe is put together differently this way over that. And it has a type of, I think there's going to be more than one periodic chart.
So let's think about maybe who behind the scenes is controlling the majority of this makeup that most people are dealing with, whether it be the corporations, the media outlets. It seems like there's about 6 corporations at the top levels that control it all, and there's a lot of good people that work at these businesses, and 99% of them probably have no idea that at the super elite levels there's these, it seems like, psychopathic, eugenicist loving, narcissistic people that like to put poison in food, poison in drinks and stuff. You look at that case that came out with the naked fruit juice that's, it's supposed to be all natural and good for you, fruit juice, right? Well, then they find out there's this insoluble synthetic fiber in it, which is basically like a couple compounds away from butane. And then, okay, we're sorry, we'll take it out. You heard about that, I'm sure. And it just, why do they do that
it's all
stuff?
about money. That's the whole weird part. It's, the thing is that now there's a movement where the ultra elite are getting rid of the elite. And that's a cleaning house. That's those papers that got released with everybody's bank accounts going on. That's the ultra elite cleaning house. And so that there's only going to be a couple of people left over. Their whole agenda is that it's going to all end like an epoch, and that when we crawl out of a cave, they want to have the defining factor of how it turns out next and how it runs. However, the problem is, right now, we have other situations going on where, like Fukushima and all the different nuclear radiation plants that are leaking, there won't be a seventh epoch if we're not careful. That's why we need to get rid of cold fusion. I mean, not cold fusion, nuclear energy.
Oh, what? You don't think we should have 55 nuclear reactors next to the Madrid fault line?
No, we shouldn't have that. That's Matt Stein's thing called 400 Chernobyls. We have a serious problem right now at Indian Point, next to New York City, and Miami is now leaking into the Atlantic. And of course, Hanford has been leaking into the Columbia River for the last 10 years. It's really bad. It's worse than anybody is aware of, and nobody is really addressing it. And basically what needs to happen is the switch needs to be turned off, because at some point the grid is going to go down, and that's going to be a nightmare.
There's some really intelligent people out there. Obviously, whoever came up with the idea to create energy with nuclear fusion, I mean, it's, to come up with that idea is great, but then as far as the common sense goes, it's retarded. I mean, just the fact that one of those reactors alone can cause damage for millions of years, and then you've got 400 of them out there. The Fukushima disaster, you've got those 6 nuclear reactors that went into meltdown. That's just one location. Chernobyl was just terrible. And then, like you talked about, Indian Point. Now, also, one thing I find fascinating is I spoke with Cliff High from the WebBots.
Yeah, he's an interesting person. I like him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. The reason I brought him up is because I interviewed him just a short time before that the nuclear event happened there in Indian Point. There started being some real bad situations out there. And he said the WebBots were predicting a nuclear event in and around New York. And then sure enough, couple of weeks later, boom, they nailed that on the head. And those WebBots also.
Yeah, now that's an example, again, of your algorithms. He uses Goertzel's math, which is a type of On's algebra, a little different than Clifford. That's the systems that normally are used, like with Jade 2.0 software. Those softwares can accurately predict a crime in New York City 28 minutes before it happens.
I mean, that's just mind-boggling. That's absolutely
well. It's
incredible.
Like Minority Report. We have gotten to the level where a machine knows more about what you're going to do than you do. However, there is the next level of evolution that allows you to go to a new place that changes intent into purpose. And I will be writing about that in the Non-Local Mind book. In fact, I'm writing about it right now, and that's how to change the movie.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the whole world's a stage. And then you talked about how these Panama Papers are basically a way to get rid of what many people think are the elite, but they're just they're the patsies, I guess, for the super rich elite. And you say they, and I say they a lot, and a lot of our guests use the term they. Do you know who they are?
Well, let's try it this way. If you look just at pharmaceutical houses, and you have a whole list of all the different pharmaceutical houses, there's, Monsanto's at the top. You have 40th down is Johnson & Johnson Wax. And, they make Band-Aids and shit like that. And their revenue right now is 4 times the state of Oregon per year. And so that is what our problem is that there are corporations now that are bigger than countries. That's why the United Nations wants to put it all under one world order. And I don't think so. I don't think I want to do that. But I don't see any way out of it. It's
just don't assimilate, and that's another thing too, is you think about the way that the media plays out these certain events at specific dates, very numerological, and for those that study the occult, and there's so many different forms of the occult.
Well, occult means hidden. It means that it's not for everybody. That was why it was for the ultra elite of Europe for centuries. All your poets, Shakespeare, William Butler Yeats, the usual suspects, they were all part of magical lodges studying esoteric sciences. And just so you know where thelema came from, it's a Greek word that came originally as one of the four basic words for love. There was eros, philo, agape, and telema, the love of will. And that's why Crowley said, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. That means you're loving to other people unless it takes you from your true will. That is, and if you are doing your true will, and it seems as if you're at odds with others around you that are counter, that's God's will. If you're doing your true will, the universe wants that to happen. That's what I have observed.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I picked up from those terms that he used. You know, sometimes people will say, oh, do what that will. That means you can just go do whatever you want. There's no consequences. I look at it as the exact opposite.
No, not do what you want, do what you will. There's a difference. That's why will means thelema. It's a actual word in Greek for love, the highest form.
If you look at some of the different types of magic, I mean, you've got the chaos magic, you've got that type of theory. There's dogmatic practices like ritual magic, where you've got the circle and the wand and the robes and the colors that relate to whatever you're doing or summoning, the talisman magic and stuff like that. But it seems like everything, in a sense, is if you really want to say magic, is a form of magic. If you think something, you have to think it before you can create it.
Well, okay, so, in anthropology, they make a distinction on different forms of, aborigines. An aborigine doesn't have high tech, and yet is at perfect balance with their universe. And it's like a woman that would drive an automobile. She doesn't go through the rigor of understanding how a combustion engine works. She knows that if she puts the key in a slot here and turns it there, that certain expectations are to follow. And that is called magical thinking. And it's like advanced physics with a mystery school. You don't need to necessarily know how it works to be able to use it.
Right. And also, I mean, you write a lot about different types of ESP, meditation, etc. If you could walk our listeners through a few applications that you would feel could give them a cornerstone to, being able to do some of these things that, maybe sixth sense type ability.
Well, okay, so the first protocol that made a SEAL a super soldier, we didn't call him that back then, but gave him the edge, was extrasensory perception, thinking with the gut. It's like ESP is knowledge that you already have, but you don't know how you got it. It didn't come through one of your five senses. Somehow it came actually from the enteric nervous system of neurotransmitters in your gut, which is what turns on the brain. The brain is there to make all your beliefs true. You got to be careful, because I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't have believed it. You can create your own folly as you are. The physical plane where we are right now is where we generally go to be sick spiritually. It's like this is a hallucination. And if you were more clear with your thought in terms of in touch with your higher self, you would, be different. It would be different. This is like fever. It's a metaphor, as a metaphor. Sure. And, I need to define a metaphor here. Let me do this. It was Gregory Bateson that said, what is your metaphor but to serve your paradox? Now, really, I interpreted that as a metaphor for a paradox. And that's how you go from one subset of relationships to another. Everything that you do is measured against different similarities and similar differences. That was John Bohm and his implicate order. And that construct is how we measure one thing from another, as always in metaphor, as if. That's a good Jungian psychotherapy term.
Have you learned how to harness the ability to kind of tap into, what somebody's thinking before you're even getting in connection with that person?
Well, the last chapter in ESP is neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. They're constantly communicating with other things besides words. And you can, if you understand that, you can read your answer in interrogation. Oh, it's a yes, it's a no, because look at the way his eyes moved. The thinking with the gut, there is an altered state of consciousness. It's not very far from where you are. It's called the blank mind state, where everything is in a light, meditative state that your ability in guessing increases 400 times. I developed this for SEALs as a way to take a psychic and improve them. And what we wanted to do was have our troops be intuitive. They didn't make bad decisions. Instinctively, they knew what to do. It had nothing to do with knowledge base. Now, that is an altered state that you can achieve with hypnosis and or relaxed meditation, where you go to a place and can have a sense of knowing. And everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. We ignore it. It is a useful tool because if you use your upper brain, that'll get you killed. If you use your upper brain, you're doing a scenario. There's two things that can happen. You're either going to not get shot or you're going to get shot. And Merlin put it really succinctly to Arthur in a book by T.H. White when he said, anything not specifically forbidden is mandatory. If it's possible, you can count on it.
Have you ever had an out-of-body experience?
Yes, astral projection. It's different than remote viewing. Yes. Monroe wrote a very good book on that when he was at Berkeley called Journeys Out of the Body. Carrington, others had written about it previous. There are a whole series of different writers through the years. They, at one time, tried to confirm or not a old Greek concept that at the moment of death, there's a body weight change, about 6 grams. That's like ba and the ka. Interesting. I don't know if that's valid. Carrington, others tried to prove it, where they were having somebody and we were weighing him, and then they would weigh him right after death to see if there was a weight change. Interestingly, there was. That did not confirm it, however.
And I'm looking here on your website right now, richardallenmiller.com, and if you go to the library section there's 11 different books. You've got ESP, Introduction Through Forms of Self-Hypnosis, and then Native Plants of Commercial Importance, Power Tools for the 21st Century, The Magical and Ritual Use of Aphrodisiacs.
Yeah, those are older books. I was a very naughty boy in the early years, writing books on psychedelic mushrooms. Now I write about pharmaceutical.
Do you think that there's a lot of spiritual healing that can take place if you have a specific trip on hallucinogens like mushrooms?
Well, that's the story by shamans that go to, Brazil, wherever, and do it. The problem I'm having with Daime Church and the current ayahuasca movement is that there are two churches at war with each other, on who's got the right formula. How spiritual can that be? Now, beyond that, it's like when we did acid 40 years earlier.
Tell us about your most amazing experience that you can remember.
My first one with Timothy Leary.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear about this. This is awesome.
The first one is always, what that is a kickstart to the brain's own production of a similar chemistry. Lysergic acid diethlamide is a toxin. and the body freaks out when you take it. And what happens next is it goes into overdrive, producing its own look-alike lysergic acid amide. And the lysergic acid diethylamide is broken down into salts and into the urine within 20 minutes of ingestion. And then the 20 hours of psychedelic experience is your reaction of your own body's brain chemistry. It's slightly different. That one is the one that connects dots when you say, aha. Crowley wrote about it as aha. Now, that neurotransmitter is kind of a goosey because it turns out connecting dots is arbitrary.
Did you, when you had that trip with Timothy Leary, where were you guys at? What were you doing? I mean, that's cool.
Well, they Harvard was trying to do a study on what would happen if they gave LSD to a genius. And they did a big study on a bunch of different people from around the United States. I think Jack Sarfati's name was one that I heard of out of New York, mine. Leary came over and talked to my mom, and then went to Washington State University and talked to my professor, Professor Riggins, who was my lead professor. None of us knew anything about it. And of course, Mom, it's okay, because at that time, nobody knew anything about psychedelics, and it was still legal, 64. And Leary took me up to Deception Pass as my guide. And I remember I was a mess. And I was, I was looking 2,000 feet down at Hurricane Ridge at Puget Sound, boiling back colors. And Leary leaned over and he said, "Wouldn't it be neat to jump?" What happened next was I discovered Aldous Huxley and the Doors of Perception. I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to hear this. I became so fascinated with how convoluted those doors were that probably is one of the things that influenced me in continuing all of my work in altered states of consciousness.
What are some other things that you've done on altered state of consciousness, or types of substances that you've used that have taken you into a dimension or place that you don't think you could have reached without it?
All of the places that you do with drugs have similar neurotransmitter lookalikes. Opiates are called ecophthalines and endorphins. And they're different than opiates. They're different than lactinum that you find in lettuce and other kinds of plants. They all are different. There's what I did is I chose Leary's neurologic circuit as a way to organize my information like Crowley did with his Liber books. And I'm going to now use that system where it's earth, air, fire, and water, having a metaphor in terms of correspondences to other metaphors. And once you do that, it allows you to better understand what the experience is and what it is not.
Okay. And also I'm kind of thinking back, too, about the Franz Barden books that he put together. He brings it up many times in all of his books that you have to follow these exercises and practices in order to get to the next level. And if you read about it and study it, that's great. And that's more the reason I guess I did it at first, was to just understand what so many people say is either good or bad or helps or doesn't help or whatever, is woo-woo isn't. And I found it fascinating because the each level, it seemed like if you're weightlifting and you're learning how to, you're not learning, but you're trying to get as buff as you can, and you're eating right, you're doing a lot of weights, it's going to take you a while to get up to 350 pounds on the bench press, especially if you're not normally that, not that big. So kind of like riding a bike or karate or anything else, you have to do certain exercises. But then when he gets into the other books, like the first book is Initiation in Hermetics, Then it's Practical Applications of Magic, where he talks about the different tools that are used, and he talks about some invocations, and also how you brought up the demons. He said it's the same thing. If you're going to harness some type of demon, don't think of it as outside of yourself, but more of inside yourself, a different part of yourself, like the shadow. So that was a really cool connection. But then the third book is called The Keys to the True Kabbalah, and in that book, his description of the Kabbalah is actually words and letters and sounds and vibrational frequencies that can actually...
Well, that goes back to his Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation.
So you can actually create via sound. And even in the Bible, as a religious person, if you are, you read the Bible, it says the first thing God did was say the word, and essentially that is a sound, a vibrational frequency. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but Hitler actually kidnapped Franz Barden, had him, took him in and some of his people that were with him because they wanted to use his powers and abilities of mind over matter to help win the war. And there was actually a moment where he almost escaped because he used one of his, Kabbalah lines, kind of like in the movies, abracadabra or whatever.
Yeah.
But,
Abracadabra.
So,
Steve Miller. There you go.
What do you think about that stuff?
So, it's all true because a lot of people have invested a lot of centuries in believing it be true. Merkaba mysticism goes way back and is all about geometry, and that's what Roger Penrose writes about in his most famous, The Geometric Universe. That book is, in my opinion, possibly one of the most important books in physics this century. I was very fortunate to be able to take a couple of classes from him and have that whole construct of torus twistor space, which is different than Hawking's and black holes and white holes. Two of them, by the way, wrote a book together. It was very interesting. I can't remember the title of it now, but he would write the counterpoint, and they would do one chapter in dueling chapters, and at the end of the book, it turns out they both agreed on the same thing. It was really interesting.
Another thing, too, if we could, Richard, is you're so well-versed in survival situations and being prepared for possible horrible catastrophes. And one of your books, Power Tools, I think has got a lot of good information on how to be prepared for things like that. But let's talk about that if we could here, discussing certain ways of becoming prepared and being able to handle what possibly might be a very bad situation. I mean, do you feel that we're kind of on the cusp of something either really great or absolutely catastrophic?
So there will be blood. There is no question that there are too many people in the world, and somehow or another there will be war, there will be this, there will be that. They're going to try to eliminate the masses. That's going to happen, and probably it will be done by nature before it's done by man. That's how it usually works. Now, beyond that, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I know that our concepts of sovereignty have gone out the window. Living in New York City, and let's say you're on a 16th floor, and all of a sudden the grid goes down, and they can't deliver water, where are you going to flush your toilet? And people are not ready for that. And it'll be real weird how they react. That is what a zombie is. In fact, the workbook, too, is Can You Live Off the Grid for 30 Days? It is basics of food, water, heat, and entertainment, all of it. These are, and your go back. You got 10 minutes to go into your house and get everything that you can carry, like they did in Nepal, or, when you have, refugees, and Katrina. And, I don't think anybody's ready for this. I'm not. I know that I'm not. And I'm going to say that today, everybody listening to this radio show should have 3 days of water on hand right now in your household for everyone in your household, including animals, and a replacement or backup plan on replacing it the first day, because the grid is going to go down. I don't know when, I don't know how, whether it's going to be an EMP strike or the sun or Nibiru, whatever. I don't know. What I do know is that none of us are ready for this, and our whole romance with electric current and the way we do business is just not. How do you get your water out of the ground, even if you have a well? You should have a sling, a side pump, where you can hand pump it out. You'd probably be the most popular person in the neighborhood if you had that.
Yeah, I remember I talked to John Michael Greer a while ago.
Oh, yeah, Greer, yeah.
Really cool guy, and he says, if STHF ever happens, instead of just being completely stocked up with everything, which is a good idea, but an even better idea is to be really good at something.
So that's Barter. There is on Netflix 3-hour thing called Remote Survival, and it turns out that the people that fail are because of attitude, not knowledge base. It will be your head space. That's why I do urban survival skills with Matt Stein, where I teach ESP, because it will be your instinct that saves you, not your knowledge base.
You brought up Nibiru for just a second there a minute ago, and there's a lot of speculation of Planet X being close, not there. I'm still neutral on the subject. I know I've done a lot of shows here on the Leak Project about Planet X and Nibiru and seen some really good evidence of there possibly being a Planet X. But even if you go to Caltech University, researchers actually found evidence of a ninth planet. I'm looking at the article right now. Just type in Caltech.
Stanford, yeah, they did, the ninth planet. We are a binary system, like almost all solar systems are binary. Ours is out past the Oort cloud. There's a half a dozen planets there, one of which might be, or not, a brown dwarf. Now, is that real? I don't know. Is it going to happen? I don't know. I do know that it is right on schedule. Oh, there it is. That's why they're sending out all the different little viewpoints to take a look at it and try to see whether or not we've got a problem or not. I think we are about to see the end of a sixth epoch. I think there will be a pole shift. I don't know what else. Geography.
So let's say you're in America right now and you have the resources and opportunity to get out of Dodge when things happen. Can you give our listeners just a couple of precursor warning signs, as well as maybe just some places that you think might be a good idea to be? Like, let's say you're in the Midwest. Let's say you're on the East Coast, West Coast, down south towards San Antonio, where I'm at right now, unfortunately.
San Antonio has that Riverwalk. That's a beautiful thing.
It's got the Riverwalk, great Mexican food, a lot of really nice people, but you certainly don't have any mountains out here. And growing up in the mountains, I guess it's kind of drawn me back. I've
never seen tarantulas 1,000 at a time walking in a single line. I've never seen, Texas has its own weirdness that, and you have your own grid.
Yeah.
That means that when the American grid goes down in Texas, we'll secede from the Union probably and be the one that survives.
Is that why you think Jade Helm was focused so much on Texas?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I know that it was mostly to shake down how accurate it was profiling individuals, and Texas is right in there for that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, it is. And then so like some of the agriculture stuff, self-sustaining. Let's say somebody just has a real limited amount of space, like a quarter acre or something like that. Is there a way to actually produce enough fruits and vegetables to sustain yourself?
No, but you could. You can. You could, for example, do a cottage industry on a quarter acre, like make herbal coffee. For when the grid does go down and Starbucks is no longer delivering, you've got something to barter. Now, you can, sovereignty, the way Crowley put it, Moda, was that there are three ways to be in this world. There was the vulgar, the adept, and the exempt. And the vulgar got audited, the adept got money back from the government, and the exempt had a 501c3. They didn't pay taxes. When I was in high school, I was exempt. I was a nerd, but I was also an athlete, which means I had access to things that I didn't want to do, like beach parties and that kind of thing, because I was an athlete. And I didn't take advantage of that. I was afraid to get pregnant, and I wanted to go to college, But it told me that an exempt status is where you're sovereign, and you have access without having to be part of the club. I did that when I played tennis, and I was a pro, and Marion Cricket Club, DuPont Country Club, others liked to have me there playing, even though I didn't have a bunch of money or anything, to keep the membership tight, and in terms of playing tennis. And so I had carte blanche. Now, having some degree of control of your life, like food and water, give you a sense of center that you will not get buying your way through with money, which, by the way, is a theatrical prop. It's not real. What's real is labor. Well, Bank of America just did one here locally. They closed a bunch of stores without even notifying their membership. This is how it's going to start to play.
You think there'll be like a bank virus that shuts down accounts?
Well, I don't know how it's going to play. FDIC, supposedly, I don't know how it's going to play. Stay tuned.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's going to be ugly. I can tell you that nobody's going to be happy.
Well, I mean, surely, if you look at people, they've got videos out where there's Black Friday and you've got mobs of thugs beating up grandma for a TV because it's high definition and it's $150.
That is the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen, was that woman being handcuffed, and she still wouldn't let go of the thing. She's $7 part from China. I couldn't believe it.
It's crazy. China's really kind of the new mouthpiece for the elitists, it seems like. They're trying to use that, just their culture, as what we should look forward to. If you watch a lot of the new movies now, they portray China as the new safe haven.
Well, there is no such thing as gross national product anymore. I remember when Snap-on and Craftsman meant something, where you had a choice in what you bought. You could either buy cheapest or you bought Best Buy. Per dollar spent, you got more bang for your buck, like American agriculture. That's all gone. Today, mostly there are 7 basic raw material suppliers, and the rest of it is branding with, maybe 30 different people making it for Walmart, Kirkland, whatever. I remember 20 years ago, I was growing feverfew for Kirkland, and they would take my bales of hay, feverfew, ship it to China to tablet and capsulate it, put it in Kirkland for Costco. Now, that was the beginning of the end for American agriculture. I think that there's going to be a need for at least 30,000 new farms this next year. Who's going to do them? And who's going to teach them? People how to farm. To be a farmer, it's kind of like being a physicist. You have to be, skilled in half a dozen things like welding, animal husbandry, tractor maintenance, whatever.
You know, I was talking about this before with one of our guests about how so many people get gung-ho on survivalism. They get prepared with a bunch of food, MREs, ammo, generators, oil, antibiotics and stuff. But they're not really prepared mentally or with the abilities.
That is the bottom line. Preparing yourself, emotionally. That, if you watch this remote survival, they have these dudes, they're sitting in a nice little tent, the radio, talking to the person, that I would drop in the middle of the Olympic rainforest with nothing. And then you have to find water, you have to find a way to clean the water, you have to find food, and you've got 3 days to go from here to extraction point. And the two people that fail, it's because their attitude was wrong. It was not that they didn't have the food or water available.
Right. And if you look at attitude today versus 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, I think back to my grandfather that passed away at 91. I mean, just one of the most remarkable people I've ever had an opportunity to meet in my life. He raised 5 kids. He was a school teacher. He managed to give his family everything. My grandma didn't work outside of the house. She was a domestic engineer. And with that said, he managed to give his family everything. He was a religious person. He gave 10% of his money to the church he believed in, and he still always had money in the bank. And I mean, it's just remarkable how you look at the mentality then versus now, where in most cases, the people that don't make a lot of money, well, it's easier for them to just live off the system and do nothing. And back in that time, he remembers when his mom had to actually go and wait in line for hours to get coupons to get milk, and it scared the heck out of her. So he remembers her crying, and just the money and family at that point in time seemed to be a lot more important than it is now. So it kind of seems like we're at a point now where I wonder if this country was invaded by China or, would we even have a chance because of the mentality?
Well, right now, China owns 50% of Grants Pass, Oregon. And that means BLM is giving away our natural resources as part of the national debt. It gets worse. Canada let them in when Hong Kong closed down. That's why they are the port of entry now, port for spice trade, not Hamburg. And now China runs all the utilities in Canada. And that is what Bundy Ranch was about. That was what Burns, Oregon was about. That is what it's about, is China is taking over the natural resources. It's really a shame. How did the Paiute put it? About getting their land back, stand in line.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what happened with Rome. It was a great nation at one point. Then it started outsourcing its military and giving everything away, and then it collapses. And I mean, it seems like maybe certain bloodlines that are in power now and relationships, maybe there's some, 6 degrees of separation there, but clearly the political stage where certain countries exist and the power and influence they have has gone all around the globe. And that makes me think of the political scene today, and you've got so many people on stage. You've got Clinton, you've got Sanders, you've got Trump, and they've all got different meanings. I think that they're all actors, basically. But do you feel that any of them are legit? I mean, the Trump statement, let's make America great again.
There isn't a single person running for Congress right now that I would vote for. Hillary actually is so bad. The last woman that did half of what she did in terms of national security, they actually executed her 10 years ago. And Trump, our president, is supposed to represent our most scholarly, our most honorable and educated. What has happened to America? This is no longer the country I served and protected.
Those certain people out there like yourself, Richard, that really want to make a difference and an impact, help people out. It takes people like you. And for those that are listening that have an opportunity to listen to this broadcast, check out Richard Allen Miller. So many books of knowledge and information there. Plus, just to have the opportunity to pick your brain, Richard, has been great. I certainly appreciate you coming on the show here with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Please do keep us informed on anything new that's coming. And do you have anything right now that you're working on currently?
Well, I have 10 manuscripts that are ready to go to press with no money. Hollywood was supposed to change things, and it was a disaster. And it was interesting. There was no promotion, and while it was a good thing to happen for the city of Hollywood, it was a bad thing because nobody showed up.
Yeah, that's terrible about what happened there.
Right now, I don't know if you've noticed the Radcon 4 level alerts and other things that are happening right now across the country. You can go to the NETC.com, the Nuclear Emergency Tracking Center, NETC.com, and get a moment-by-moment update of radiation levels and the high spots going on around the country. And it is really bad because Fukushima is now starting to fall everywhere.
Yeah, and don't fly, folks. If you get up in an airplane, I've got, proof of this. I've got a radiation detector built into my watch, and it's usually hovering around 0.07, 0.08 microsieverts in some parts of the world. Some places are twice that high, triple that high, and that's really low. But if you get in an airplane, it's going to go up to about 4.2, which is 60 times higher than here around.
Lorraine Murray has actually put out some publication to say that the radiation level in the stratosphere from Fukushima is now fatiguing the aircraft. And you can tell by just looking at the tires on the road and how they are now having effect from the radiation. The aircraft coming in from Asia into LAX is now removed and done clean privately because DEQ is all over it. It's like being in a microwave oven. Literally, it's that bad. And while, I will fly, it's just be aware that you're like going through the Van Allen belt. It's not going to be very safe.
Yeah. Man, it's a lot of stuff we're going through right now. Certainly great times we live in. Hopefully people that listen to this will be the change they want to see. And thanks for everything, Richard. I certainly appreciate you coming on the show with us here at the Leak Project.
My pleasure.